I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for taking time to join us for this discussion as we celebrate the first anniversary of the MeToo movement. Thank you to the panelists for taking time and to everyone who's called in. I think, let me check, as of now, we have 27 participants, which is great for a Sunday. I'm sure there are more people calling in. Let me start off by the words tweeted by Elisa Milano that started this viral Me Too movement. It said, if all the women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. So this was a tweet that created this movement. What is amazing is that it wasn't a call to action. It was not a part of a campaign. It was not any concerted effort to get the world to listen or for women to take action. It was just an attempt to show how widespread the problem of sexual harassment in the society was. And what it sparked is a movement that will be seen as a momentous event, at least I think, in the history of women's rights, especially in the workplace. So I'm actually going to let the experts do all the talking. We will start with the panelists introducing themselves. This will be followed by the panelists giving a brief on why this topic is of interest to them, following which we'll ask a set of questions. What I'm going to do before that is also going to show you who the moderators are. So this is me. Hi, I'm Supriya Menon. I'll be asking a couple of the questions. Then we have Emily. Emily, if you could just say hi.
Hi guys, I'll be asking some of the other questions. My name's Emily. I don't think I've met you guys yet, but I'm excited to ask some questions and see where the discussion goes.
Thank you, Emily. And then we have Nimi Jacob.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Nimi. And we have Ramya Onatu. I hope I'm saying the last name properly, Ramya. They're going to help us keep all this under control, because people are calling in from all over the world. So that's absolutely wonderful. So thank you all for joining. And I'm now going to head over to the panelists. I'm going to call each panelist name. So if you could give a brief intro. So I'm going to go alphabetically. Can we start with Dr. Beena? Dr. Beena, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Supriya. I'm Dr. Beena. I'm calling from Kerala, India. I'm a doctor specialized in pathology. I'm an admin of a feminist page on social media. I'm affiliated to a support group for domestic violence survivors. And I'm very active on Twitter. So often we are able to mobilize activists from all over India, if required, for victims in very far off places too. So Me Too, definitely this is a very good initiative. Thank you for letting me participate in this.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Beena. Kat Smith, hi.
Hi, good morning.
Can you give a little brief about yourself?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
I started in 2004 as an advocate for children's rights for sexual assault victims, and I didn't realize how many problems there were with the system. I knew there were issues, but it's come along. I think the Me Too movement has definitely been long overdue and has helped a lot of people, especially people who had been assaulted or harassed years ago, who didn't have a voice and were embarrassed to come forward. So it's definitely been a good thing in a positive direction. And I've done a lot of work quietly behind the scenes. So it's definitely interesting what has gone on the internet now. So I think it's a positive thing, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kat Smith. Uh, can we move on to Catherine Delson?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm thankful to be a part of this conversation. I am an attorney. I am currently in Florida, but licensed in California. As someone who's from, an impoverished nation like Haiti, I think I'm always amazed at the rampant rights that we have here in America for people. But that doesn't mean that we always live up to our ideals. And I think the Me Too movement is kind of people holding us to the standards that we've set for ourselves, the standards for morality, the standards for treating individuals equally across the board, and giving people the opportunities, economic opportunities and work that they deserve and that they've earned without the pressures, without anything that is harmful to them personally. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation and commemorate, as we commemorate the 1-year anniversary, and also looking to what is next for this movement in the future.
Thank you, Catherine. Jamie, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Yankovitz, and I'm a scholar, educator, and organizer. And I started the Survival Arts Academy to protect women and girls against violence and sexual assault. I work primarily with communities of women of color, indigenous communities, and members of the LGBTQ community who are at the highest risks of violence here in the United States. My program is called the Rape Prevention Program. And specifically, I train women in situational awareness, setting boundaries for their bodies, recognizing forms of abuse, and most importantly, how to build strength and reflexes and muscle memory to respond to sexual assault. And the training that I do is rooted in the indigenous Filipino fighting arts, which is called Kali. And that not only evokes the goddess warrior spirit, but it also points to the matriarchal culture of the Philippines long before Spanish colonization of the 1500s. So part of our practice, not only in protecting women, it's also—
There is a slight interruption. We lost you. So we'll come back to you later.
Thank you.
So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little?
So, hello everyone. I'm Vaikiri Aryat. I am a queer Dalit feminist from Kerala, India. I pursued my PhD in the identity assertion of queers in Kerala at Department of Political Science in University of Hyderabad. I write in magazines, books, and online journals on gender and caste issues, queer rights and issues, intersectionality, and student rights. I was an active participant in student agitations in India in recent times, including Rohit Vemula movement in University of Hyderabad. Currently, I have moved to US to be with my partner who's working here. So about Me Too, like the way I see Me Too movement is from my caste, gender, and sexuality position as a Dalit queer woman. So it carries so much meaning to me.
Join the meeting.
Personally. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So so when I talk about it, just please bear in mind that what I'm about to share is from an Indian social location. So I remember feeling guilty and shaken for the frequency with which I was being hit upon by random men to acquaintances for as long as I can remember. It started the moment I started taking up space around male-dominated world around me. I got hit on very frequently from men who held any kind of power over me. So when they would get denied, some would get angry and would end any sort of friendships or whatever kind of relationships, or try to force it without taking my no really seriously. So some spread malicious rumors. So it was very confusing and sometimes scary for a long time. I had an ex who even kept slut shaming me. He said I was the one inviting them all. So I remember losing confidence in myself, being afraid to talk to opposite sex, policing myself, my words, body language, and even character and attitude, so that nobody think I'm a loose woman. So I kept asking male friends if my behavior was so odd that they think I'm inviting them in some way. So see, I kind of felt responsible for the kind of violence I endured. So there were so-called progressive people among these predators. So when I denied them, they kept calling me pseudo-feminist or less progressive person than them. So to prove my feminism or my progressiveness, I was supposed to sleep with them. So that was the point. I realized there was something wrong with this. Like, what kind of feminism require women sleeping around to prove their progressiveness, whether they like it or not? So what has happened to all those high talks on bodily agency and free will? So it didn't make sense. So it took me some time, but I started realizing no matter what I do, it just won't stop. So I will either be a slut or a prude, because it wasn't about the message or invitation I gave. It was much more deep rooted than that. It was information I carried about myself, my social location, caste, color, gender, sexuality, visibility, feminism, taking up space, and refusal to fit in gender roles and whatnot. Precisely what made me me, would make me an available body. So the queer or Dalit or black bodies are exoticized or hypersexualized at one hand, and on the other, if they dare to take up space, visibility, raise their voices in general, refuse to say limited to their social locations, it is deemed an invitation. So when this movement started in India, I had noticed how often when certain women share their Me Too stories, their experiences are laughed at or ignored, while Me Too accounts of some other women are readily believed. It is not a coincidence that women who get ridiculed often are women from lower social strata, or women who are deemed promiscuous, or who don't have desirable bodies or perfect bodies, or cisgendered bodies, or are not feminine enough as per the normative. So not very rarely do I find people commenting, why would he even consider you? So as appalling as it is, people often forget that sexual violations are not manifestations of sexual frustration. It is a power play. It is the urge to teach someone her position as a submissive, or as a boundary to be conquered or marked, something to be set right, or an available vagina, a mere vagina. In every such gross display of brushed male ego, we are told it doesn't matter who you are or what you achieved. You're only a vagina in the end. So for me, Me Too movement has successfully called that out by placing a mirror in front of all of these abuses. Each survivor account has painfully reminded the predators that in the end, they're all mere dicks. Excuse the expression. They need to get off their high horses. All that they achieved, what they tried to prove about themselves are a farce. They're being asked to take responsibility of their violence. So no matter how long ago they did it, they are held accountable for their privilege-based violence. So this is the essence of Me Too movement for me, and this is what holds. This is what helps me relate to Me Too movement.
Thank you, Vaikari. Thank you for sharing your very personal experiences, and thank you for also moving right into the intro part of why this movement is close to your heart. We really appreciate your forthright and frank talk about it. I think when we come back to you, I want you to take 2 minutes to tell. Some of the panelists or participants might not know what Dalit means. So if you can take 2 minutes to say what that means, because you use that to describe yourself, so it's very quintessential to who you are. So take 2 minutes to describe it, and I'll move on to the next part. Go ahead, Vaikari.
I'm just done with the introduction part.
Okay. Now, why don't you talk about when you talk to your Dalit woman, what you mean by Dalit woman? Because others might not know what it means.
To me,
no, because they don't understand what the word Dalit means.
Okay.
People from the US might not.
Okay. It means broken or scattered. It's a term, it's used for certain, what do you say? Describe ethnic groups in India. like the most oppressed social groups in India. Like I don't know if you are available of the 4 Varna systems in India. Like this is fourfold Varna system. It is part of Hinduism, and
It's the caste system that
yeah,
we
the caste
follow.
system. That's what. So Dalit is the 5th Varna, which is like which they say is Panjama. So we we are like actually we are not included in the what do you say, the for like
Hierarchy.
this Hinduism's essence. We are the most oppressed. Like I belong to that community where we are like oppressed, and we were subjected to untouchability and slavery for a long period of time. So when
Correct.
you're able to listen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
So
yeah, I'm from
I
that
just want to
generation.
wrap it up so I can move. So, all right. So her identity as a part of a sect belonging to a group of people who were not even considered fit
People,
enough to fit into the caste system,
exactly.
the Avarna.
Yes.
So, a very significant part of Indian history and the social fabric of India. Okay, so now I'm going to move back to Dr. Beena. Dr. Beena, would you like to give an intro about your interest in the movement? Because we have like 10 minutes for each participant. So I think Vaikari has already done hers, or we could come back to it if she has more. But Dr. Beena, maybe you could add to your interest in the MeToo movement.
Okay, I've been comparatively luckier that way because most of the groping and street harassment that I have experienced has been from strangers, total strangers. I haven't had to work under somebody who held the power and, to have to face such a person daily in my work. One of the, um, but however, while I was in medical college, while I was doing my MBBS, the problem there used to be that there was this power that the seniors held over you, that a lot of the medical students would be like somehow we had to withdraw inwards so as not to draw attention to ourselves, so that we would shrink, so that we would not face when I was visible, I would have to face sexual harassment at the hands of others. So I would automatically withdraw so that I wouldn't have to face any more of such incidents. One of the first incidents I had was getting a very explicit, sexually explicit letter from an anonymous sender, and that was just 1 week into joining my medical college, and that really scarred me so badly that I just withdrew for some time, and then every time I would somehow get back to being okay and interacting with people again, there would be some incident which would tell me that I need to take less space. So I think that this there's a culture basically of uh, very little of some sort of male entitlement in we need to teach boys that they are not entitled to women's bodies. That is definitely lacking. We as a society, that is something we really need to enforce. And another thing that as a doctor now, what I see around me basically is very few women come out with um uh, accusations of sexual harassment here, because there's very little support that they're going to get from the public anyway. But what I hear very often are marital rape, which are not even coming under the purview of Me Too at present. Most of the places where I see, there are women who are, they are coming from the lower class, what we call the working class of women, and a lot of them experience marital rape, and they need abortions without the husband knowing. And this is a situation there. So I think Me Too is just begun scratching the surface. That is all. There's a bigger um, uh, uh, amount of cases like marital rape and all that really needs to come out, which has not. So that's
Yes, long way to go for the movement, right? Long way to go.
long
All
way to
right.
go.
Okay. So we are now moving on to Kat Smith. Kat,
Hi, good morning.
good morning. Your involvement with the movement, or any personal experience, or why you're so where's your heart? What part of your heart is in this movement?
Right. I mean, for me, it started before a year ago. In 2004, my daughter was sexually assaulted. So
Oh.
I got involved with the judicial system, and there was really a lot of problems everywhere from the sex offenders don't get a lot of jail time. There's big issues with the law being very liberal in Hawaii, is where the crime occurred. And this guy had been convicted now in 3 states. And I've seen a lot of issues across the board with women not coming forward who were raped, or people not wanting to talk about sexual assault. Some rape victims aren't strong enough to go through trials, which I understand psychologically, the impact it has on the victims. And also, I felt like I needed to be a voice, so I advocated for children's rights. And then I went to the media, and next thing I'm meeting with the Attorney General. We're changing the laws. So this was before we had, cell phones with internet. So now I do work where I'm trying to keep one party in jail. I'm also trying to educate people who don't understand they've been abused, or that they have rights as victims. I've had victims come to me and say I'm their hero, and I'm like, well, no, one girl said no one advocated for me when I was a kid. I had no one to help me, protect me. And I know a lot of victims who have not gotten justice, and also, they need more than just legal help. They need counseling. They need, like the one lady who does, helps with self-defense, or just anything where you're empowering the women, or male victims as well, because there's both sides who have become victims of sexual assault. But in this MeToo movement, it's been long overdue, and definitely a positive thing, because I feel as if it's so simple. Just Alyssa Milano, a celebrity, puts out a tweet, and then you've got millions of people. So it's definitely been a powerful thing for everyone. But I couldn't believe how many roadblocks I hit. I knew there's corruption in the system in Hawaii, but then, I've been sexually harassed. I've never been assaulted, but I know that it's happened in the workplace. I've said something and nothing was done about it, or I was told, oh, she's lying. So I've seen a whole bunch of different issues with. So I think this is a positive thing. I mean, for me, I've been dealing with a whole bunch of different issues since 2004, but I couldn't believe what people were facing. I mean, I actually I've been threatened online. I've had people come after me that I don't even know. So, and I was trying to educate the community about what was going on and how to protect their keiki, which is a child in Hawaii. So Hawaii is very different than the mainland. We have a lot of issues that the mainland doesn't, but it's still America.
Yeah.
I could see some of the problems happening in Hawaii that would maybe be an issue in India or other countries as well. So unfortunately, it's nice to hear everybody's stories, but it makes me want to do more. So.
Thank you, Kat.
Sure.
Thank you. So I think one of the things you said is, true. I think most of us women have faced it, have heard of our friends who have faced it, but just the prevalence of it is like just staggering, even to us. Even though a lot of people we knew in our, 6 degrees of separation had faced it, so why did we think it's only in our circle? So anyway, great points, Kat. Let's move on to Catherine. Catherine, hi.
Hi.
Please let us know why this topic's dear to you.
Sure. Unfortunately, this is something that I have personally dealt with when I was younger, and then I didn't have the MeToo movement or the cognizance to know that something wrong had occurred, or that I should in particular do something about it. But I'm not really going to focus on that. I think for me, it's less about what's happened to me, more about the bigger picture of what we become as a society when we as adults allow certain behaviors. We tolerate them, we justify them in that she wore a skirt that wasn't appropriate for work, in that she was looking too sexy, and that's why he made the comment. The excuses that we make and where we perpetrate the cycle that allow people to think that in our America that this is acceptable behavior. For me as an attorney, and not just as an attorney and an immigrant, I hold true to a lot of the promises that, you know, America has given us. And that's, you know, the belief in that we all have the right to liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness. And anything that interferes with that, anything that is contradictory to that, that means we fall short. That means we're not living up to who we're supposed to be as the America that is, you know, the defender of the weak, and as the America that provides the opportunities for you to become and be who and whatever you want to be. So for me, it's about, yes, I understand the personal issues, the personal justifications, but how it's less about, you know, the glorifying the pain, what has happened, but more about how do we hold people's feet to the fire? Where do we set up the accountability levels for corporations, for businesses? How do we make sure that these people are not just losing their jobs, but that they suffer greater consequences besides just losing a job? Because someone can lose a job and they'll go and get another job. So what other ramifications can there be for those behaviors? And how do we as a society stand up and say enough is enough, and make sure that every little girl in their teen who's working somewhere, who's been physically touched inappropriately by a manager or supervisor, that they know this is not acceptable behavior, and that you know, you shouldn't have to go to work the next day after something like that happens. Having that level of education and really making sure that it's not just, I mean, if you think about it, if grown women are having these things happen to them and they don't necessarily know how to deal with it. Imagine when you're a teenager and you're working for someone you look up to, who's an older male, who's somewhat of a role model for you, and something like that happen. So for me, it's not just about focusing on our pain and our suffering, but really about putting systems in place, accountability measures, so that men that are in positions of power in any business, whether it's a small business, and I know we're going to get into that, but you only require to have sexual harassment training if you have 50 employees or more. What about those other smaller businesses? I happen to have been working for a smaller organization when my experience happened. So it's all about focusing on remedying and fixing what we can, so that 10 years from now, or not even 10, maybe 20 years from now, we're not going to need another movement for people to come out and say this has happened 20 years ago and I didn't do anything about it, but really educating and legislating on a higher level what laws need to be put in place in addition to what we already have, so that this doesn't happen anymore.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. I love a couple of points that you brought about, which is that how it's all about human rights, especially the ones guaranteed by modern societies. And two, that yes, what about all those young people who are working, who probably are not talking and probably are targeted more? So thank you, great points. Maybe we can elaborate in some of the future questions. We have some questions about the sexual harassment training also coming up. We'll now move on to Jamie. Hi, Jamie. Maybe you could talk about the topic.
Hi, everyone. The MeToo movement is personal to myself as a woman, as every woman I've ever spoken to. I was born and raised in New York City, and the levels of harassment and sexual attack and assault and verbal abuse starts at an age long before you're even conscious of what is going on. I've been harassed since before puberty. I've been taking the public transportation system since I was 11 years old. And I've seen more male genitalia on the public transportation system than I've ever seen anywhere else. So this is my experience as a woman. And it's laughable and it's common. And every other woman I've ever spoken to has had the same experience. So this is not, unique to the United States, but I think the United States has a very interesting rape culture. And it is supported by the president and the Supreme Court and Hollywood, and everywhere we look, we are shown as women that we are not protected, that no one will protect us but ourselves. And so my effort in this movement is to create a practical and grassroots and direct action response. And that's where I come forward with this kind of training. And the training, is very emotional. It's triggering. It's confronting a lot of trauma. And the women that come into my circle and space are more often than not women who are survivors of sexual abuse and assault and trauma, or they've grown up seeing it and witnessing it in their families, in their home lives. Sexual assault and domestic abuse, more common in the home than it is anywhere else. So, coming from this place and creating a space just for women to come together and talk about our experiences, that's the MeToo movement right there. That's step one. To talk about it, to create education and awareness around it. But now where do we go from here? And this is, I think, where we all stand together. 1 year later, what do we do now? And the response that I've received from the trainings that I've done out here in the indigenous communities in Los Angeles have been incredible. Women say that they feel a greater sense of security. They feel more confident, powerful, amazing, badass, better than therapy. It becomes this incredible moment of transformation where you can not only talk about trauma and things that are very difficult to bring to light, but also find a way to fight back and learn how to fight that. And just to very briefly talk about the concept of Kali, because I think it's very interesting in this panel. Not only is Kali, the warrior goddess, not only does it point to matriarchal culture in the Philippines, but the concept of the Kali combat is very unique in martial arts because it's focused on close quarters combat and on the blade. And so everything that we do is based on weaponry mindset, that your body is a weapon, your voice is a weapon, your hands are weapons, your feet can move. And so when you have this combat, this makes it particularly useful for a smaller opponent like a woman to fight off a larger opponent like a man. So Kali is not only for women in name, but also in technique and in spirit. So I find this really interesting, and the philosophy around it really goes hand in hand with, I think, what we're all trying to do, which is to create a better and safer world for all girls. So
thanks, Jamie. Using your voice as a weapon, I think the Me Too movement is that. So thank you. Waikari, I'm going to come back to you. Maybe you'd like to add something to what you said previously, because it was very interesting. So we'd like you to add something more to it.
Well, I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry. I just rushed into.
You're fine. You're fine. Don't worry.
So I was talking about how the power structure is being called, like the power itself is being called out by this Me Too movement. So as a Dalit woman, like I was saying earlier, as a Dalit woman, it actually carries more meaning to me because historically we are like considered the Dalit category of women are considered like our bodies are hypersexualized. So like I was saying, it is like the body is considered available. So it was deemed to more sexual violence if you take the history of India. like even in recent times, the bodies of Dalit women are often violated. Even like you still can see it in even in social media. Like if I were to share my personal experiences, like like there are times when I make a political opinion on any kind of like issues, while maybe my like of course there are women who are getting attacked and when they make a public opinion about in like political opinion about issues, but then the kind of abuse that I receive are basically directed to my color, how like I'm being told how I am like not like, excuse the word, fuckable in their opinion, like how I am like um, how the men find me so how do I put it, like they have an aversion for the kind of my body, and the opinion that I say are based on the kind of um, you know, what's that word, um, the frustration that I feel because of that so the way it is being directed to my color and my caste position, it is not out of ordinary for most of the Dalit women in
Can't
India
hear her.
and most of the oppressed class and caste women in India.
Kari, you're
So
cutting off. So
this is different from what's happening in maybe hello. Okay, can you hear me? Hello.
we can. Yeah, it
I
was
hope
cutting
I'm
off. Now
audible.
it's fine. Now you're fine.
Okay. Sorry, there was some problem with the internet. So, so what I'm trying to say is the kind of patriarchy that we deal in India is very different that maybe in the rest of the world, because what we have in here in India, you know, strictly like layered with the caste system in India. Like, you know, it's kind of a how do I put it?
Kari, you are getting cut.
You know,
So we.
the relationships are defined by gender, caste, economy, and economy. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm
It's
sorry. My
better
internet
now,
connection
but
is really poor, I think, right now. Am I audible?
you are. You're
Okay.
just cutting
So
off.
what
So
I'm trying to say is, okay. So I'll not go into details of Brahmin patriarchy. I'll just point to this idiom of marrying within the particular caste, the caste group. That is the like that is like the central point of Brahmin patriarchy. So the thing is that with that kind of a system prevailing, the purity of the caste is bound on the woman's body. So the boundary, like the purity of the caste is like, what do you say? The caste, the boundary of the caste is by bound. The woman's body is treated as a weapon or as a boundary that should be conquered. I hope I hope I'm clear. I'm making it clear. I'm trying to explain that to
yeah, we have a
friends in
question
the
coming
US.
up, Kari.
So the system, yeah, sure.
We have a question coming on about power.
Okay.
So maybe as a part of that question, you can elaborate more.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but you're cutting off, so maybe I don't know. It just with audio, move your machine maybe a little bit. Maybe the Wi-Fi. So you're cutting off.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi is down, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. So thank you for sharing that. So I think it was question of power, the question of women being used as pawns in the power play of society.
Yeah.
That's been going on for centuries. So thanks,
Thank you
Vaikari.
for putting that
And
more clearly.
yeah, I am going to hand it off to Emily to start off with the questions. If somebody else had anything else to add, please let us know. If not, we'll go to the questions. Are we all good? Looks like we are. Emily, would you like to go on to the questions?
Definitely. So thank you guys
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys, first of all, for sharing your experiences and background and stories. It's really enlightening. And we have a few questions that we'd like to, kind of bring our discussion together, touch on a few different points. So I'll jump right in here with question number one. So in America, as you may know, we have the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, and California has the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the DFEH, and these protect workers from unlawful discrimination. And they can file complaints by phone, letter, and the California DFEH can pursue the case on the employee's behalf. So these are supposed to be protections we have in place to prevent discrimination, harassment in the workplace. And the first question I have for you all is, do you all know how widespread this protection is? Whether women can file complaints freely without retaliation by their employer, and whether the culprits are punished. So basically, these protections we have in place. I guess what we want to know is, do they work? Are women able to, actually make the complaint and voice it without fear of punishment? And do the complaints, are they taken seriously?
Sure, I can start, Emily. I think it's great that we have these protections. I think with anything, you can never be fully there and fully protect someone from the little stares, the little, snide remarks that might be made. But as far as the law is concerned, they do have these protections, and women and men, in fact, have you made themselves available. You have actually used these protections. For example, in 2018, there were 7,609 cases filed with the EEOC. And out of those, I believe about 15.9% of them were filed by men. So about 85% of them were filed by women. And out of those cases that were filed, the 7,609, a larger majority of them were resolved to the point of these companies having to pay out $56.6 million. This is by settlements. So just to give some of the background. So when the EEOC receives a complaint, they actually take it, they do an investigation, and if they would approach the company, and if there is cause, as in justification for the complaint, there's evidence and it's warranted, then, and the company has, I guess in a way, not I guess, and if the company has enabled an environment where it's pervasive, where the harassment has occurred, they haven't done their part in protecting the employee, then they will have the option to settle the claim with the EEOC. So in 2018, the EEOC actually collected $56.6 million of dollars, which, it's not a small sum of money. And I think when dealing with employers, it's important that they know that they are responsible for creating a culture, an environment that is safe for their workers. And what the EEOC does not do, which I think is the next step, is how do we follow up on what happens to these perpetrators? Do we know how many of these men who actually were involved in those complaints, whether did they lose their jobs? Did they, you would hope that's what happened, and that these men were punished. And I guess I don't want to use the word punishment, not so much punishment, but that they in some way were not just giving a slap on the hand and you just don't do this anymore, so that we don't create this culture where this is acceptable and it happens and the company pays the money and it goes on and on and on. But women are availing themselves of the protections that are available through the law. But I'm sure there are a lot more women that are not doing that, and it's how do we make sure that more and more women are making sure that they're filing the complaints, if not with the see they're seeking other protections that are available out there.
Thank you, Catherine.
Anyone else? Would anyone else like to weigh in on this one?
I don't think they're doing enough. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm in California now, and I don't. I just think more needs to be done. I don't think people are aware of their rights. It's a common problem in America where people don't know they can file a complaint, and then some people are. And also, I've dealt with a lot of issues with the system, and just in fact going to the police where victims were told, well, they didn't have a case, or the police didn't move the case forward. So I know there's a lot of issues with corporations in America, and I think it's good that big Hollywood celebrities and with the MeToo movement are being held accountable, I guess is what the word I wanted to say, hold someone accountable. But I think if more information was put out there in America, especially in California, that people have the right to file a complaint and what their rights are, I think that would just give people more of a voice if they were harassed at work or in the workplace.
Yeah, and to add to what you just said, Kat, I think the onus is on the corporations to do that type of training, to do that type of education. As it stands, you have to have a certain number of employees to be required to have sexual harassment training. Maybe the first step is to have it that if you have 1 or 2 employees, maybe not one, because one person is not going to harass themselves. But if you have 2 employees, then you're required to have the training, because that's where it starts. We give so much of our time every day to a job. We spend more time at work than we do in our own home. So it's really behooves me that the employer would not want to make sure that they're creating a safe and productive environment. And the productive part is also an important part, because the best way to get corporations to do anything is where the bottom line is hurt. And when you're being harassed, you're not being productive at work. You don't want to go to work. You're not feeling good about going to work. So it's really to their advantage to make sure that their workers are protected and that they're feeling safe and productive.
That's a good point.
I had one question as a follow-up to our panelists who have worked in India or are currently in India. What protection do we have in India for these? So, Dr. Beena, is there a commission like this that you can go to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 2013, it's like first we had the 1997 Vishakha guideline. Then the 2013 Workplace Harassment Act came. And according to that, any organization that has more than 10 employees should have an internal complaints committee. And those who have less than 10 the government should have a local complaints committee which can take care of these things. But the thing is that in Kerala, like in my state, the situation is pretty dismal because I personally know cases where even those who have petitioned are still being forced to work under the same employer, and 2 years have passed after the first petition and complaint was given. So things are moving very slowly. So a lot needs to be done in this regard.
Anybody else on this?
Well, I can talk from I was a student for still a student, so I can only talk from that that point of view only. So yes, what she said is right. What we have is gender sensitive committee against sexual harassment set up in our university, and this is there in almost all the educational institutions that I studied. Of course, it is called gender sensitivity committee, but in my experience, I have had friends who had made complaints to this committee, and all of these women most of these women who have made complaints, they were all held responsible for the kind of violence they have endured. like I had stated earlier, like they were made to sit in front of a committee and they were asked questions like, why were you out at that time, and why were you drinking, and why were you wearing that kind of dresses? And you know, it's really difficult. See, we have this committee that is there, yes, but it doesn't provide a kind of safety haven for women to come out with you know, their cases. Like, it's really difficult to make a case in such, even in such a committee. So I think what we really need like is like, yes, there are like guidelines and everything, but I don't even know if people are reading it. Like even the members of this committee, I don't think they are even aware of you know, the guidelines in this committee. So it is generally you know, a very disappointing experience, but then still it is, at least there is something there that where you can go to. And there is another experience, like it's a personal experience of mine, where I went to the International Film Festival of Kerala in the year 2016 or 17, I don't know, 16 I think. So from there I was like, there are like delegates from all over the world in that space. So so when we got sexually harassed like 2-3 times, like we experienced that from different people. And from when we got sexually harassed at that place, that I started inquiring if there is a mechanism, you know, to hold people accountable for these kind of things. So I went and talked to the organizers, and at first I was given a very positive response. They told me that they'll set up some kind of committee, or you know, there's a at least you know, even after 2 years, even after the whole 1 year of MeToo movement, and MeToo movement, I like now. So
Okay, do we want to go on to the next few questions?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi,
cool.
Emily. I had a small network issue. I apologize to everyone. So the next question is about sexual harassment prevention, which I heard Catherine talking about. So it's required by any organization that is more than 50 employees. This has been put in place to reduce the liabilities of corporations. And there's been research that's been coming out that says that it's really ineffectual. What matters is the culture of the organization. Organizations where women are treated as equals, where employees are taught to treat each other with respect, organizations where women have been given leadership positions and are actively promoted and actively participate in organizational decisions, those are the organizations where sexual harassment prevention training has been effective. So given that the majority of harassment happens at work, or at least the ones that have come out recently, I know Jamie was saying, or was it Kat? One of you said that it's still true that the majority of sexual abuse happens at home, but at least in terms of harassment in the workplace, what are the responsibilities that corporations have? Can they just stop with this mandatory training? Do they need to do more? So from any organization you work in or have worked in, please give us your insight.
I'll start.
Kat? Yes.
I think
I was counting on you.
I think they need to do more. I think when it comes to the benefit of the bargain, when it comes to negotiating any type of employer-employee relationship, the employer is in the position of power in terms of being able to negotiate the terms and the conditions for the work. Catherine can't walk into an organization and tell the employees, this is how you're going to behave, this is what you're going to do. If I do, you know what they're going to say? So who are you? Even if I was a manager, it's like, so who died and made you Queen of England? So no one's going to really own up to me telling them what to do. However, when the employer, the person who is responsible for the paycheck states, this is how we're going to treat people. This is the culture of who we are, whether it's based on their policies of treating people with courtesy and respect, whether it's making sure that employees do not use profanity, it's making sure that they dress a particular way, they arrive to work by a particular time. Really, the employer is the sole arbitrator of that relationship, and they can mandate and they dictate the terms. So it's really up to them to make sure that the work environment is safe, that it is conducive to growth, to personal growth and development, and making sure that the employees are treating each other accordingly. But at the same time, I also want to say that there is some level of accountability that we have to for our own personal belief and morality, in that as a society, we know right from wrong, and that we should also govern ourselves accordingly. So like for people who go to church, for example, when you go to church, you don't do certain things. And it's not that there's a law in the church that says you cannot do this in the church. It's understood. So by the same token, I think we need to breed a culture, or we need to raise that level of, I don't know if it's morality or personal standards, where we know, it's just not acceptable to say, look at her ass. It's just, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't want somebody to say that to my sister. I wouldn't want somebody to say that to my mother. So I'm just not going to say that to my coworker. So I think there's a level of personal accountability, but at the same time, it falls, the bulk of the work, the majority of it falls on the employer to ensure that the environment is safe, and that it is something that they're responsible for, and that they can make sure that it happens, and they can do it more easily than I would do if I were to be the one trying to police the workforce environment.
I basically just agree with what she said. It was well said. There just needs to be more. It needs to be just a general, everybody knows right from wrong, what's acceptable and what's not. And then there are consequences to actions. And I think it should be any company in America with more than 2 employees. It should just be like a national law, or a national, I don't know, something that applies to all 50 states.
I'd also like to add that the companies should focus to cultivate a culture of a safe work environment. They should focus more on, employing more women and including women in policy making.
I think I'd also maybe, what can we do? Just following back to something that you said and Dr. Beena said about when you were in college, how you were, you had to face harassment, and what can we do in those spaces? Because as young women or young people going to college, you think you're going into a safe environment, and it's truly not. So it's not just the corporations, it's also the schools, our schools and universities. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
I would like to say one thing. When I was in medical college, that was in at that time we didn't even have such options. As I said, whatever we faced, we were not aware of the steps we could take to ensure that these things were not didn't happen to us again. So I think today the situation has changed so much. So now they have committees and all. I think what we can do is, as part of orientation when students enter college, they should be given an orientation regarding this also. That if they have complaints regarding sexual harassment or anything, what steps they need to take, who they can go to, who they can speak to, so that a safe space can be created even in colleges, because most of them travel far away from their homes, so they live in hostels. They are cut off from their families at that point. So I think the most important thing would be that. Second thing would be, I think, gender sensitization classes should be given to all the students. As I said, that male entitlement, that is something which it's a very pervasive thing here in, I think everywhere. And it's not a problem in just one area. I think everywhere, all over the world, this thing is there in different degrees. So gender sensitization, how to treat other people with respect, whether it's regardless of their gender, their sexual orientation, their caste, whatever, race, everything. So that's, I think, one thing that we can do.
Yeah, I would like to add to the point that Beena has made. My partner actually studied in the US. Like he did his master's in university from US. So he was telling me from the the time they were given the orientation program, they were like given especially to students from Asian countries. They had given a class about this making the university a better space regarding making them gender sensitive. So when he told me that, I was like really surprised, because we don't have that kind of a culture in India. Like we in our education system don't consider that kind of giving that kind of an education at all. So instead, what we have is we don't give students this kind of awareness or any kind of program to sensitize them about gender issues. And then we set up this kind of they call it the gender sensitive committee against sexual harassment and all, redressal mechanism, where students go and they get harassed even more. That is what is happening. So another point is that I also would like to share this incident. Like in 2013 in my university, the UGC, there's a committee set up by UGC, University Grants Commission, for those who are not familiar with it. And so they came and they started, like the agenda was to ask students how to make the campuses more gender friendly. So when we were talking, we were all asked to make our opinion, and when I went there and talked about it, I said I talked about the need for placing a condom vending machine, so that students don't feel they shouldn't be ashamed of their sexuality, for one thing. So, and secondly, I was talking about making the campus queer friendly as well. So that is another thing. I'm kind of familiar with the queer scene. Me being a queer person myself, familiar with the queer scene in India, where we have a tendency that most of the queer, especially the trans people, trans men or trans women, they tend to drop out of schools and colleges, because the environment they have is it's not queer friendly at all. Like they get harassed a lot. We are talking about women getting harassed. Of course, I know it's like a larger issue and all, but this one is also happening. So I made like in a university space, you would expect a bit more, people to be a bit more accepting and listening to your problems and all. But instead, I got really ridiculed. But I'm really glad to say, after about 4 or 5 years, our university has added trans to the column, like to their applicants column, and we have like 2 or 3 trans students now studying there. So a change is being made, but very slowly.
I'd like to add something to what you just said, Vaikari and Dr. Beena. I think it's absolutely imperative that universities all over the world require this kind of training, especially for incoming freshman girls. The highest rates of rape and sexual assault in the United States are for women of age 18 to 34. So that's college age women. And if you're enrolled in college, you're 3 times more likely to get raped as a woman. And if you're not in college, but of the same age group, you're 4 times more likely to get raped at that in the United States. So, and globally, those numbers are even bigger. So I think that, it really is the responsibility of the institution to provide protection, not only for their students, but for their faculty and their staff. And alarmingly, in the United States, more than 30% of universities across the country don't provide any training, whether it's sexual assault, awareness, or anything like that. I think the students are doing more work than any of these institutions. The campus women's centers, the LGBTQ centers are doing far more work than the institutions themselves to protect their own students. So I think part of our work is to encourage and force the universities to protect our students, faculty, and staff. So until we can get to that place, I think, you know, it's scary as a young woman or as a parent to send your daughters or to send your children off to get a better education. Really, you're putting her in danger. You're putting her at harm, especially if she's, you know, dealing with multiple oppressions of her identity.
I'd just like to add one other, a situation particular to Indian. I mean, since you mentioned the universities, so this is like particular to Indian university spaces. So, like there were like a lot of MeToo accounts were coming out about, I mean, from university spaces recently. They were like talking about all those progressive circles, like you know, about men who claim to be feminists, you know, or feminist allies. They groom these women, and they are like, I had mentioned that in my like a little bit of talk about Me Too movement, that these people they convince these women that you know, in order to be progressive, you should like sleep with men. If you're not, you're a prude, you're like you're holding on to your moral values and all. So so in a way, these girls are like coerced into sleeping with this, like the consent is actually constructed. They're not really giving the consent. So if they refuse to give it, they're like, sometimes there had been incidents of rapes, that people were talking about it, and then sometimes they just you know, spread rumors about these girls, and they go into depression, and there have been a lot of issues like that. It's coming out, and in a way, I think that, you know, talking about this issue, bringing this forward, you know, these all these women who talked about all of this, they make the spaces a bit more safe for other women. Like, they are warning other women that these predators are there. Like, you need to be really careful. So I think it's a positive sign.
Thank you, Vaikari.
Yeah,
I think
and
I'd like to add one more thing. Can I
Okay.
just add one more thing?
Sure.
What I feel is that this the concept of consent and bodily autonomy is very poorly understood. At least in India, that is what I've felt, that a lot of times that is what is needed. So just adding that to what Vaikari said just now.
And I want to say one quick thing, Jamie. I actually think it should start in high school. I think as soon as you're 16, you're able to go work for a company. Because my experience happened in my teenage years, and I had no idea that something. I mean, I knew it was incorrect, but I didn't know the extent of this is so wrong on so many levels, and where to go and what to do. I think as soon as you're 16, if you can take sexual education in high school, you can take a training on sexual harassment or something like that.
Sure, and to even take that point further, we should require, children at the age of 6 and up, because this is about, like, Dr. Bina said, understanding consent, understanding, autonomy over your body. Little boys start touching and poking and pulling at a very young age, and girls need to learn very early, don't touch me. Stop touching me, and I have students from the age of 6 to 60. And when you see a little 6-year-old take a grab off her arm and say, don't touch me, that's incredibly empowering. And if we start that young, we are creating a better and safer culture, because as these women grow older, they know their boundaries. They know, this is where you do not cross. And so, we should start as young as elementary school. It should start in the home. We're trying to create a new culture here. We're trying to get away from rape culture. We need to socialize not only young boys to be appropriate and respectful and accountable for their actions, their words and behavior, but we also teach young girls not to be fearful, but to be powerful and strong and not going into any victim blaming, but understanding that a woman has absolute control of her body if you give her that knowledge and that little bit of training starting from an early age. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Catherine, Dr. Bina. It starts wherever we can start.
Okay, thank you. Emily, maybe you can move to the next question.
Definitely. So Our next question is more about the Me Too movement as a whole. So some say that the biggest success of the Me Too movement isn't just that guilty offenders have been punished, but it's actually that when women are voicing their complaints, that they're being taken seriously, unlike in the past when their complaints were ignored. Unfortunately, though, this isn't true everywhere. In many industries in the United States and in a lot of situations in India, women's complaints are still not taken seriously at all. So what needs to happen for that change to be made so that male-dominated organizations, media, police, they don't automatically ignore women's complaints?
Right. I think like we need to have you know, more awareness starting from very young. Like you know, you need to have more awareness programs, especially in state missionaries, police, education sector, health sector, corporate sector, everywhere. We should focus on cultivating a work and social culture where no one needs to feel responsible for the violence they endure. And like I also would like to say that we need a media policy as well. You know, more often we see a tendency to use kind of a male language and gaze in such reports, like when such a case comes up. And always, you know, there's a tendency to hold harmed survivor with why now? Like if they're talking, you know, about it after years, they're hounded with questions like why now, and like why didn't you like say no then, you know, stuff like that. Instead of, you know, instead of that, they should be asking the predator why at all. So this is male language and this male gaze. So in general, this I think there's a need to cultivate a gender sensitive language itself, like in all sectors, especially in education sector, where like you know, like Kat has been saying, we like we need to start it really young and train them, you know, to be you know, tell them how to be what it means to be you know, autonomous about your body, and you know, and teach them like about consent basically.
Like just something I've observed very often is a lot of victim blaming from people in the medical profession. So when a rape victim comes to somebody like that, so a medical professional who is you know, who's not sensitive to such issues, that can be catastrophic for the you know, for the victim. So I think like this is my field, so I feel that medical professionals, lawyers, and those who deal with survivors, rape survivors, sexual harassment survivors, they should definitely be sensitized to, like Vaikari said, that there should be this sensitization in terms of the language that is used. So
I think I think one of the things that we need to do to is to make this a human issue and not more a feminist issue. I'm not on this panel because I am a woman, and this I'm on this panel because this is a human issue. It's all of our issue. It's a societal issue. Even if you're a man, this is something that could affect your daughter, your mother. It affects all of us. It affects all of us in how we treat one another. So I think if we take the labels off and not make it about feminism, and we don't make it it's a women issue, it's a man, or it's even the divisiveness that it's men versus women. We're all in this together. It's standard of human decency. If you're a good, decent, moral, upstanding person, and that doesn't mean you're a religious person per se, but if you're a decent person, you know not to. It's the same way you know not to go into a store and take something that you didn't pay for because you just know that's not right. It's the same level of standards where you know this is just not appropriate. You don't touch someone inappropriately. You don't say inappropriate things to them. So I think once we raised the awareness, the consciousness to something more, I was the word inclusive and not so divisive, I think that's where we'll see the momentum and people embracing this more, and not feeling that it's a men versus women, it's a higher up versus the lower level employee. No, we're all in this together. We just want to create better working relationships amongst everybody, and that's where we will all win.
Can I come in?
Yes, of course.
I think precisely that is the reason why feminism is important here. Feminism is not men versus women, as we all know. It's basically it's patriarchy versus feminism. So I think that feminism is not it doesn't need to take the blame for being divisive here. Basically, feminism is what is driving all of us towards understanding that this is not right. What is happening? This rape culture is not right. That's what I wanted to add.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Bina. I'm not saying it is the reason we're divisive. I'm saying with the Me Too movement, what we're seeing is that we're pitting men against women. I'm not saying that's the fault of feminism at all, but I think that's the outcome that we're seeing, where now men are saying they don't feel comfortable taking their lower level employees to coffee. They don't want to be in a room with them without somebody else present. So it's created this kind of device. I'm sorry if my comment came across as though I'm saying feminism is dividing us. I'm not saying that at all.
No, I understand, but I still think that it's not men being pitted against women. That's what I feel. It's basically just powerful men who are being protected by other powerful men. That is the that is the structure that is being attacked in Me Too. So I don't think that it's basically men versus women. It's basically feminists versus those powerful men who want to hold on to their power. So I think, like, maybe I hope you understand what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I understand.
Basically, that is what they are trying to project, that this men versus women, but it's not actually men versus women.
Yeah, there are men that have been assaulted as well. We have men
Right.
that
Definitely. The survivors versus and supporters versus.
Yeah, Dr. Bina, I agree with you. I think it's all of us against patriarchy.
Exactly.
It's all of us against violence, because patriarchy and violence affects men, women, and all the genders in between.
Exactly.
So, we need to recognize that until all of us are free, none of us are free.
Yeah, true.
All right, if all the panelists are done, I think we had somebody, is it something related to this question, Nishad, that you had some data? Because I did see you put up some data in the chat. Is that what you wanted to add?
No, it's not related to that. It's something else.
Okay, can we come back to you after all the questions are done? We have an open forum after that.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Moving on, Emily, I guess it's my turn to go next. Kind of lost track a little.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thanks. So here, the next question, I'm going to keep it, I'm going to reduce it. So the real question is, urban women might feel a little empowered after the Me Too movement, but has there been a real difference in the sense of security for women who work in low-end jobs? Or has this movement bypassed a large part of the population because of their socio-economic status? So I know Jamie will definitely have something to add to this.
Sure, I can start. I see the Me Too movement as a larger historical context of movements led by women, particularly women of color across the world. Putting the Me Too movement in the context of the United States, I see it connected to the Black Lives Movement, which was started by 3 Black women. I see it connected to all kinds of movements that, address the Asian American, Asian Pacific Islander community, the Chicana movements and Mujerista movements here in the United States. We can trace, connections to Me Too all the way back to, the Black womanist movement of the 1970s or feminist movements of the 60s and 70s. I see this as all kind of like an overarching you know, it all really comes together. It's all connected. And one thing that is bypassed are some of these voices. There's also a movement that I'm not sure if the panelists are aware of, known as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls here in the United States and Canada and all over North America. You know, that's a movement that's trying to bring attention to the disproportionate levels of violence in Native communities here in North America. So I think there's so many things going on. We need to constantly draw connections and parallels to our struggles to understand that this is not, you know, particular to any one group. It affects all of us, and it particularly affects men, because not only are we working to re-socialize and understand how toxic masculinity is affecting us as humans, but how we need to change that to create a better culture, right? A culture of strength and preparedness and women coming together in solidarity. I mean, this panel is a great example of women coming together around the world to talk about these issues and see where can we move forward? How can we organize better? How can we go into our respective fields and professions and take that next step? So yeah, I think there's a lot going on, and I see, I have hope in the future. I think that it's an exciting time. It's also a scary time, because as much as we move forward as women, there's a lot of backlash that we're facing. And there's a lot of authoritarian figures that are fighting us on these. You know, we're trying to bring something very basic to light, you know, human rights, body autonomy, okay, respect. This is basic human decency, like Catherine said. You know, we're trying to get people to respect each other and respect our bodies. And we're getting, you know, fought on every level from it. So, you know, this just makes us have to work even harder and stronger together, not only on the educational level, but also in the streets, in the communities, on our respective battlefields.
I'd like to add something to what Jamie just said. Obviously, there's one thing that is happening in India that one cannot ignore. There's this fact that the access to social media has helped in transcending the movement to almost at the ground level. Yes. So there's a platform to speak up and to be heard for everyone. So let me share one thing, something that is interesting that has happened. There's this popular daily in Malayalam, which actually published a grossly misogynistic cartoon in their column. So it depicts an old woman, like a very old woman, probably in her 70s or 80s. So she's holding a card saying MeToo and hashtag MeToo, and telling a baffled guy that there's an old case from my kindergarten days about the guy next door. So as gross as it is, you know, trying to paint all these survivors as some old, you know, older women making nonsense claims years later, I see it as a paranoia that has gripped the male psyche because of the Me Too movement. You know, the term Me Too has made into, you know, even everyday conversations of an average person now. So the possibility that anyone can be called out anytime, no matter when they committed the violence, is carried to a majority at least. So that paranoia triggered by all these women who came out with their trauma and truth, it has definitely made the world a better place. You know, a safer place for all the women, in my opinion. Like, of course, there are this question that how accessible the means to open up, or, you know, to have listeners, or, you know, even cultivate the courage to speak up for all these women. Like, there are different women from different social strata and all that. But in spite of that, the world is slowly made into a better place, even for people who are yet to speak out or yet to be heard.
I think you're right. I think the power of social media has really allowed all of us to communicate with each other and see that it's, you know, this affects every woman everywhere, you know? And I think that this is really the chance for us to turn hashtag MeToo into hashtag never again. So that is our mission.
I agree. And at least now we're having the conversation.
Right.
Before, it was something that was being swept under the rug. So regardless of how we want this to move faster, we want better resolve, better things to be happening, we have to be thankful for the fact that we're having this conversation. It's out there now.
Yeah, and I think also the power of the Me Too movement showed how difficult it is for women to come forth with their stories. You know, one of the things that struck me was how many years later women came forth with their trauma. That just showed how deep and hidden and hurtful and hard it is to even bring that to light. So the fact that it's become a national and international conversation is exciting, but it's just the beginning. You know, we have to take that conversation and turn it into policy, into action, into organizing, and into changing every level of every institution until this oppression doesn't exist. So we have our work cut out for us.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, do we want to move on to the next question? I think it's my turn. Okie dokie. Well, so as some of you guys may know, America has the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, while India has the People's Union for Civil Liberties, or the PUCL, which both of which are engaged in helping individuals to fight legal battles, protect their rights, you know, for example, like their illegal imprisonment, something like that. So do we need a similar defense fund or a defense body to help women's victims of sexual harassment so they have a better chance of getting justice? Do you think we need some sort of similar body or a specific, you know, branch or something dedicated to helping women through this system?
Can I answer this? I definitely think we need advocates for the rights of victims. I started doing it pro bono because I was so disgusted by the limited resources from the prosecuting attorney, from just the police in general. So I think we need everywhere, and start in the schools, start college education. I just think it needs to be more, I think, I don't know if it would be run by lawyers or just advocates or anybody who just wanted to make a difference, but I think that there's not enough support out there at the moment. And it's come a long way for me from 2004 to current, with social media has been a big, and the Me Too movement a year ago, but I still think there needs to be more support, and then awareness for, you know, victims sometimes can't come forward. They suffer from PTSD or other issues. So there needs to be more education on that as well, so that, you know, everybody knows what PTSD is, and that a lot of victims don't come forward. I'm not sure. I know when I started, they used to say that it was 1 in 4 women in America had been sexually assaulted. I'm not sure what the status is now with the Me Too movement, if that's brought to light that the numbers are actually higher or the same, or I'm not sure as far as India is either.
I would co-sign on that. I think we could benefit from a program similar to the Guardian Ad Litem program. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Even before I became a lawyer, you know, this is, to me, I've always been, you know, wanting to make a difference. And if there's someone that's been treated less than the way they should be, you know, I want to, if I can help, I volunteer with them. And you don't have to be a lawyer to be a Guardian Ad Litem. And that's advocating for abused children. And I did that before I went to law school. Before I even applied to law school, that's a program that I was a part of. So I think to tap onto what you said, Kat, I don't think you would need to be a lawyer to be involved with a fund or, you know, an organization that is specifically there to help victims. Because I think the work there's so much work to be done. We cannot necessarily put that on the shoulders of you have to be a lawyer, where there are people who are dedicated, who have the resources, who would be more than happy to lend a hand. You just have to create a program and a system that, you know, people can be trained so that they can be effective advocates and further the movement that way.
Right.
So I would like to add something to what was said earlier. There was this recent survey by Reuters Foundation, which ranked India as the most dangerous country for women. And the countries on second and third Afghanistan is number 2 and Syria is number 3, and both are war-torn countries. So you can assess the situation from that. And the statistic somewhere is about between 2007 and 2006, there were about 4 rapes per hour. I think that was the statistic available from India. This is a very recent survey. I just wanted to add to what was said earlier.
Okay. No, thank you guys for sharing on that one. We can move on to the next question here. Supriya, are we good to move on to the next question?
Yes.
Okay.
I realized I was muted, sorry. According to Dasha Keltner, who's written a book called The Power Paradox, it's very interesting what he said. He said the power paradox is this: we rise in power and make a difference in the world due to what is best about human nature. But we fall from power due to what is worst. MeToo movement is also about power. It's about questioning the abuse of power and holding people accountable as they fall from power. I would like your thoughts on it. I know Vaikari had earlier started talking about this, how it's all about power. So maybe you could start us off, Vaikari.
Okay, so like I have, like at least I've tried to point out earlier, all of these, all of these sexual violences we see are not about sexual frustration. They are manifestations of privilege and power, especially in an Indian context. I had earlier talked about that what we are fighting here is not just patriarchy, it's Brahminic patriarchy. So, when caste and your social location, it is also a part of, it aids the patriarchy. It is very difficult to fight it. So, what I've seen is in this movement, power from, even tiny or minute levels are exposed by this movement, in my opinion. So, because I'd say that, so because in MeToo movement in India, we have seen incidents where, even students calling out on their professors, senior and sometimes on their senior students, their classmates from affluent backgrounds. And we have seen Dalit women calling out Dalit men and trans women calling out cis women. So it's like, each and every power structure is being challenged by this MeToo movement. So it tells us that even how multi-layered the power structure is, and how even one victim of a certain power structure can still be an abuser in another context where they have power over another person. So it's like MeToo movement holds, in my view, it holds everyone responsible for the power they have over another person, even in the minutest level.
Please chip in, I just wanted to start off with her, but I'm hoping others have an opinion on this too. Kat, do you have something to say about the power?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically an abuse of power that comes into play. And like Catherine had said, men can be victims as well, unfortunately. And I think they actually are less likely to come forward than women are, which is even more disturbing or disconcerting. So I think that there needs to be more awareness. And the Me Too movement is huge. I think a lot of people think it's all about women, but it's actually should be human rights for everyone in every country, not just America or India. It should be universal, I guess is the word I'd like to use.
I'd like to add that, all of this is about power and dominance and understanding violence. And I think the more that we analyze and understand these things, these larger issues, the more that we can break it down into what we can do about it. And I think that when it comes to power and dominance, going back to language, I think Vaikari, we were talking about it, like language is so important. And there is a problem in language. Language is patriarchal, especially the English language. When we associate masculinity, we associate that with power. We associate male power. We don't necessarily, especially in this patriarchal society, talk about women's power and women's strength and women's ability. And I think that's one of the major shifts that we have to make, because when I speak to survivors, of rape and sexual assault, they tell me that a lot of, that moment of attack happens in a moment of fear. And, when we look at this from a psychological standpoint in terms of rape and also a neuroscience standpoint, the natural tendency of the human body in a response to attack is to freeze, for any animal. So for humans as well, we freeze, and that moment of freezing is a moment that puts us in danger, as we learn through, something like martial arts or combat training. But even people who have been trained in the military have been raped. So even military training doesn't guarantee protection or any kind of control or power. So again, it goes back to dominance and questions of power and weakness and who is weak. And, I think that it's interesting and important for us to reclaim that power as women of color, to reclaim the language and shift from there. Part of the training that I work with women is in that moment of freeze or, sense of attack or vulnerability, we need to train out of that. Instead of freezing, we need to respond and run, get away, get out of the situation. And so, trying to recondition our bodies and teach our bodies new muscle memory and new ways to overcome trauma, I think, is just the beginning step. So I think that's where I'm at in terms of the work. I'm thinking of power and the body and dominance and violence and how we can work on the individual level, one-on-one, speaking with other women and working with other women, training other women, and then we can address some of the larger issues. If anyone wants to add to that.
Okay. Emily, maybe we can move to the next question.
Definitely. So this one is more about dating, interpersonal relationships, and how the MeToo movement might impact that. So some people have heard the argument that the traditional idea of courtship, dating, courting is facing a challenge now because of the MeToo movement. So I was wondering what people's thoughts are on that, and if there are any negative aspects of the MeToo movement that we should be concerned with, just more broadly.
I think most of the problem that we are seeing is because of the lack of understanding of the concept of consent. That is the reason, and male entitlement and lack of understanding of bodily autonomy that is causing all the trouble. So it's easy for this talk of Me Too having gone too far. That's really bullshit. I don't think that is like, as I said before, I feel that it's only scratching the surface. It's just started scratching the surface. Just especially in India, I would say that a lot of socioeconomically oppressed women have not even started voicing their issues. So a long way off.
I'd like to say another thing. We have a tendency in India, like in Indian movies, and encourage obsessive stalking as courting, and preach that a woman's no means yes. So it's more of it's part of an Indian culture kind of thing. So after this Me Too movement happened, when this has been going on, so I've seen many exclaiming that they don't know how to approach women because of this. Like, which is kind of funny because it is as if they're expecting us to teach them the etiquettes of being basic human beings, human respect and decency. It's guess what? It's not the responsibility of women to teach men how to approach them like an equal, in my opinion.
Yeah, just to add to that, Vaikari, I think that one of the negative backlashes of the Me Too movement is people not believing women and not believing survivors. And so, that's been a major hashtag push: believe women, believe survivors, believe our stories and our truths. That's one negative thing that I can think of. One positive thing that I see is that it puts men on notice. I think men should be afraid. I think men should be, that they shouldn't think that we are just sexual objects or, just, something to be done to, right? Like we are humans, we have autonomy, we have brains, we have bodies. And so like men should be afraid. And we should be creating a culture of powerful women. The more that we create that, the more that men will learn, we will force them to learn what boundaries are, what consent means.
Yeah, I was talking about that paranoia earlier. Like I said, I find it really good. It makes the world a safe place for us.
Right.
It makes us strong. I really like that.
I guess we can move on. Okay, so I know we were talking about complaints. So my question is, some men fear that they may be wrongly accused by women. And if they're accused, there will be no presumption of innocence, and the public mentality is that you're guilty. How do we address this concern?
I think
if you take the media recently, I think what came to my mind was the whole Aziz Ansari case. You know, it was like, you are deemed guilty before you even got a chance. So whereas, you know, it's a very hard line to draw. And how do we make sure that there is a presumption of innocence?
I think in the Aziz Ansari case, a lot of it was, again, the issue of consent only. And what I would like to say, I think somewhere that was in the Aziz Ansari case, there was definitely a lot of lessons that I think for people basically, because consent can be withdrawn at any point. That is what people need to understand. And one thing about false accusations, we always hear false accusations when we are talking about rape survivors or whatever. The thing is that false allegations only make up 2 to 8%. And that is same for every crime. For every crime, the false allegations are only 2 to 8% of the allegations. But only one scenario is where we talk about false allegations. So there's definitely something wrong with the general attitude.
Great point, Dr. Veena.
I think it's important for us to not make a judgment on the individuals as people, and in the beginning, not necessarily look, you know, is she a bad person? Is he a bad person? But more focusing on the facts, which is kind of hard to do with something so emotional. But I think we have to walk that fine line. Otherwise, if you become judge, jury, and executioner, then it's of no benefit to anyone. And the people that are falsely accused, which there are no statistics out there yet to say that out of X number of claim, here's the highest percentage is false accusation. If that was out there, if it existed, I'm sure they would have held it. It would have been front page news. But
it is there. It is there.
I'm sorry.
Not in America.
2 to 8%. This is the false allegations.
Is this in India?
No. This is. I think this is the rain statistic. Yeah. I'll just tell you.
I'm in. So, Catherine, would you like to continue?
Yes, I'm sure if it was an alarming number where it was like 50-60% of it is false accusation, then we would have heard more and more about that. So I don't think there are that many people out there that's going to put themselves in such a what's the word? Such a delicate situation. Just to put something out there that is negative, so I think it's going to be a small amount of cases where it is false accusation, but by the same token, we still have to do our due diligence, look at the facts, understanding what has happened, and not convict the person before we have the chance to understand the true nature of what happened.
Thank you.
That's true. I mean, I've been through a rape trial, and it's still the he said, she said mentality. So it's, unfortunately, in America, we're supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, but we still have a big problem in this country, unfortunately, with our president and the way he gaslights. Or I don't really want to get into politics, but he's definitely, I mean, if everybody watched the Supreme Court nomination of Kavanaugh and how we still have a long way to go, because that definitely was a red flag to me that there's still a lot more work to do. Some people did not believe the victim, and then even our president tried to I don't know what the word is. Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
I'm
And
sure
what,
everybody in America saw this, and it was disconcerting.
yeah, and what message is that sending our young people? You know,
Right.
when they turn on the news and they see that the people in power don't believe the victim and support, you know, white supremacy and patriarchy and violence against women. I mean, what does that tell women? Who's going to protect us? Right. And so, you know, that becomes the question. And, you know, going to what Dr. Bina is saying, you know, this is very important to understand that the statistics of rape are alarming. You know, they don't stand up to the statistics of false allegations. You know, when in the United States, every 9 seconds a woman is assaulted, and every 98 seconds an American is raped. There was a recent global study released by the United Nations last November that revealed that 50,000 women around the world were killed last year by their intimate partner or family member. Right. So these are huge numbers. And they're talking about false allegations. I mean, it just shows that they're not taking this issue seriously, or they're just trying to make it seem like it's not really a serious issue when we know the facts on the ground and we're living it as a reality.
You know,
I'm just going to do a quick time check because we have 8 minutes left. I think after this, we'll switch to the last question. And I actually would like to give 5 minutes at least for the audience members who have a few questions. So
can I come?
Yes, I'm waiting for your statistic.
So there's this false allegation of sexual assault and analysis of 10 years of reported cases. David Lissack, Lori Gardiner, Sarah Nixa. So they put the statistics at 2 to 10%. Yeah. Basically, it goes between basically around 2 to 8% is the general. You can go. I can send the link.
Maybe you can put it in the chat. You know, there's a chat option. If you go there, you can share it with everyone.
Okay.
That would be really great.
Yeah.
All right.
But it's not an alarming number where you would say it's, you know, 50+% of them are wrong. It's not. That's a small number.
I think if anything, the Me Too movement is helping more victims to come forward so that they're not afraid of, I think it's a positive thing in overall, personally.
Okay. Emily, I'm going to let you ask the last question.
Definitely.
Can we go to the last question on the list?
For sure. So there's an article in The Economist magazine showing that, after 1 year of Me Too, public support for the movement is down. So I was wondering why this may be the case, and why people think this is the case.
I mean, first of all, do you agree with the article? Do you agree with it, that the Me Too movement support is down? And if so, what can we do to keep the momentum going? So I think basically everybody disagrees with this.
I don't think that it's gone down. I think that it's more just average. It's not gone up or down. It's kind of just, it's still progressing, I guess is the word I'd like to use, so that it's evolving to where we can continue to move forward and make positive changes. I think it's a hype. That's like my personal opinion. The hype around the movement has gone down, but the movement is still strong. Dramatically.
Yeah, not too much, not dramatically. Okay, so there's nothing to worry about.
Yes, and I think after the hype comes the real grunt work. If you know, it's like, you know, after you have a party, everybody's excited. Yeah, we did it. And then after that comes the cleanup, comes the, what do we do here? What happens? You have to go to work the next day. So I think the real people who want to institute change will still be involved in the movement. They're still going to be able to do things, even though it's not front page news. And we cannot forget that the Me Too movement brought down 201 powerful men, and half of their replacement are women. So that's a great accomplishment in itself. And I don't think it's over yet.
All right.
That's another thing that the movement has, what I feel is that movement has transcended so much. You know, it has like passed through different social stratas. So what has happened is, what I feel is that, you know, anyone can be a predator. so it has brought out that kind of a condition, like you think, yes, you know someone for for a long time, like your whole life, but then like suddenly someone is coming out and saying these things about him, and suddenly the someone you think you knew, you learn that he could also be a predator. So people won't like that. But I think it's only a positive sign. Like anyone can be held accountable, no matter how long ago you committed the crime. So it definitely makes the world a better place. So what has been deemed normal for a long time is now redefined by these powerful women who come out and challenge these men.
Thank you, Vaikari. So I think those were good words to close our panel discussion, that this is only making the world a better place. So thank you to the panelists, but I'm now opening it up for the people who have called in and patiently stayed with us. At one point, we had around 30, I think, participants, which is really great. So I'm going to come back to Nishad. Nishad, your question you had, are you still here?
Yes, I am still here. I was just trying to figure out how to get back.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, what I could observe was a lot of these discussions were just focused on a few things, primarily a defensive approach. Then there was a lot of discussions on how to tackle this after the incident has occurred, how to tackle abuse and sexual violence after it has occurred. Religion and patriarchy was completely ignored. What do the panelists have to say about the role of religious indoctrination, regardless of which religion it is, and how it has influenced patriarchy to be so prominent in most ethnic societies? And second question is, how do you address the lack of sex education in ethnic communities, especially in a large population like in India, where sex education is a taboo subject? It is not encouraged, it is not taught. How do you tackle those things? So there's just two questions. That's it. Thank you.
I do believe religion does have a part in some things. I've seen some religions in America that the culture is of abuse. They're a cult. They're not healthy. There's abuse within the church. And I think that not every religion is right or wrong. It's just a personal belief. So I think that this needs to be a movement that where we can separate, like separation of church and state, where we can separate religion from the movement so that people know right from wrong, just because that's what it is, not because our religion tells us to, that not everybody agrees on. If that makes any sense.
Of course, the religion tells us. Of course,
religion definitely has a role.
It absolutely tells, if you read Deuteronomy, it clearly mentions that women are objects of trade, and that women have to be kept aside when they are menstruating. All those things are there in the Old Testament, and it is also there in the New Testament. Women are objects. It's there in the Quran. It is there in all the Hindu scriptures. So of course, religion has a huge role to play. So we cannot just say that all religions are good. I mean, all religions are terrible at treating women, and we cannot take that out of the equation.
We had this recently. We had nuns coming forward against bishop, accusing him of rape. So religion, and the thing is that church definitely supported the bishop, and the nuns were left without much support. And he was definitely charged, and but he's back now. He's in a different place. So the thing is that there is very little for women to gain from coming out. There's so much of Basically, religion is a very powerful structure, but again, powerful men protect powerful men. And even outside religion, I think um, there's one difference when it's religion, it's difficult to question the authorities.
Yeah.
When there are clerics and bishops and priests who are involved in raping uh, their other people,
Yeah,
other
but
the women and
the thing
children.
is that by coming out about the rape within the church, I think these nuns have this is like most of these people say that this has been going on for like a long time, but this is like I don't know. Before that, I think Amen was written right by one of the ex nuns. Like 2-3 nuns have already came out, and before the MeToo movement, they had come out and they had talked about their violence that they endured at the hands of fathers and bishops and all. So, what I think is that this I don't really know for a fact, but what I've heard is that the church is finding it difficult to find young girls who are willing to be nuns anymore. So in a way we can really hope that this is making it a little bit more safe by this at least there is that for these women to come out and talk, for coming out and talking.
Just to add to that, I think that religious institutions are vehicles of oppression. And I think that's the important thing to remember about it. I don't think it's the fault of religion or religious texts. I think it's the fault of patriarchal interpretation of the religious texts. I think that, you know, to blame religion or to blame any one thing is unfair, because these are larger oppressions that are connected to each other. And just to give an example, using the Philippines, the Philippines was colonized by the Spanish for 333 years, and it was through the Catholic Church. They used religion in order to, you know, create their colonial means and oppression and violence and rape. So I think we need to tread carefully when we talk about what are the real root causes of violence and how we can address them across the board. And this is where women's voices are the most important, and women's leadership are the most important. And the only way to take back the power is to put it in the hands of which it was taken away from, which is the women.
Great point. We are like 4 minutes over because I promised 10 minutes of time to the participants. I'm just going to keep it open. If you have to leave because it's past 9 Pacific Standard Time, feel free. I understand you have other commitments, but does any of the participants, do you guys have any questions? Feel free to chime in. It's 9:04 here. We have 6 more minutes. So,
my second part of the question was not answered.
Okay, what was it? Sorry.
It's about sex education and the importance of sex education in teaching young men and young boys on respecting the female body and treating women with respect, and those are not taught in ethnic communities.
I think this was already discussed.
Yeah.
I think it should be universally followed.
I think when we were talking about consent and we were talking about body autonomy, people did talk about starting sex education as early as 6. I heard one of the participants put 7. I don't know who it was. So there was a brief discussion on it. Yeah. You wrote that, yeah. So yes, there was a brief discussion on it. I think lack of education.
I'm sorry, I might have gone out for a bite. Sorry.
It's okay. I think, the point that was said is, there is definitely an understanding that we do have a lack of awareness and understanding, even at some very basic levels, and how this understanding and this culture of treating each other with respect, respecting one's bodies and respecting others' body has to be taught from a very young age. So yeah, we did go over it. So thank you. Thank you, Nishat, for your question. Does anybody else have questions?
I have a question.
Okay, can you? Yeah, hi, Pranav. Did I get your name right?
Two
Samir.
questions. Samir, yeah.
Who is this? Samir, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 questions actually.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to NPR and they mentioned something like kids who are abused come out at an average age of 56 years. So that's really shocking. And also, I didn't catch the full conversation on the NPR, but they was talking something about campus rapes and child abuse in the church. So they were saying something like these things don't go through the normal judicial channels. So my first question is, why is that true? The campus rapes and the church abuses, do they go through the same judicial channel? And the other question is, has the MeToo movement taken in child abuse victims and men, or is it just purely women based for now?
I think the Me Too movement is for anyone who's been the victim of an abuse of power, sexual assault, sexual harassment in the workplace, in the church. I think it's really important because the churches and the colleges do have a different way of investigating sexual assault, but I think this is bringing to light that it's not working and more needs to be done to change it. So I believe it's focused on women majority, but there's also male victims and other victims who have come forward who, I had a male friend put Me Too on his Facebook. So it made me, I didn't know, but like I said, it's not just women who are coming forward, and this is from his childhood, and he's a 40-some-year-old adult now. So it's definitely not just, it's an issue of abuse of power and victim rights and a whole huge issue that apparently is global, not just in America.
Yeah, true. I don't know if you have seen, followed the Indian context there itself. Like I earlier mentioned that, like we have had different, like Me Too accounts coming from different strata and different spaces, like especially from university spaces, which I'm really familiar with, where they're calling out, abuses. The abuses are either their professors or it can be their classmates, and sometimes it's their seniors. And there have been Me Too accounts of queer people where they have had abuse from people who hold some kind of power over them, like a queer woman, what do you say, like a trans woman being in a relationship with a cis-bodied woman who has abused, like it came out in the newspaper and all. In a website it came. So I've had my male friends who, like she was saying, I've had my male friends who had shared their Me Too accounts. So I think it's an all-encompassing movement. It basically addresses, like I was trying to say earlier, like the abuse of power. Basically, it's about the abuse of power and establishing your dominance over someone who holds less power than you. So it can be anyone.
Okay.
And I just want to add about the campus rates of sexual assault and rape. I think it's very difficult for educational institutions to deal with these situations because they're put in the middle of dealing with, someone who has been a victim of sexual abuse and maybe a student or faculty member who they feel the need to protect. So the campus is put in this predicament in between. And I think that is why we have to focus more on preventative measures rather than what to do after all of this occurs.
Thank you, Jamie.
My question is, sorry, my question is really like if there is a sexual assault case on the campus, is the case handled by the college or does it go through the judicial system?
I think both, but it depends on the school. They all have different policies. Unfortunately,
Yes, that's correct.
They have an internal mechanism, but if need be, they'll report to.
But if there's something really solid evidence for the assault,
yeah,
will it go through the judicial system or will the colleges just handle it themselves?
we had attempted kidnap and rape in the campus, and I still remember like the first, the first informants were, of course, the committee set up in the campus, and they informed the police afterwards, and then police was involved, and I think the school supported the survivor in the case.
Can the victims go directly to the police and bypass the institution?
No. The thing was that the committee was called upon, and they were the ones who, like, at first, the survivor was given, I don't know, counseling kind of, like support and whatever legal options that she had. Like it was explained to her, and then with her permission, they went to the police.
Most of the time, what universities and colleges do is they put the curfew so that women cannot go out after dark. Rebecca Solnit talks about this in when explained things to me. She says that when she was young, in a campus, a woman got raped, and they put a curfew that women should not go out after dark in the campus. So someone put a very different remedy. They said that men should not be allowed to go out in the dark, and everybody was so shocked. So the thing is that the perpetrator gets to move around freely, and the victims are the ones who are forced to stay inside. So maybe a change, a dramatic change in the way of thinking might bring about bigger change. Stuff like this, interventions like this, where you say that the perpetrator should be, shamed, and perpetrator should be the one who should be made to sit inside and not the victim.
Right. Like in Colorado, I believe we have a rape shield law that protects the victim, and I wish that was in every state in America, but unfortunately victim rights are different in every state in America because we're separated. So but I have a college-age daughter now, so this is definitely an issue that I've taught her from the age of 3 what so I don't think there's an age where you have to start at age 6 or 7. I think it's as soon as you have a small child, you teach them, good touch, bad touch, and that's their body and they have rights. And I think the earlier the better. So education is huge, and also support for victims.
Yeah,
I don't think the colleges are doing enough. I think they have, some are better than others, but there's been issues with Penn State and an issue we had in America and other other issues were rape cases here where they were prominent, wealthy, and unfortunately the school didn't do enough.
And even in recent cases, I don't know if you all heard about the case at USC with the gynecologist, medical professional actually sexually assaulting students on campus. In that kind of situation, it's very clear that power and violence are being, placed upon students who have no idea or no control over their situation. So, this is something we need to always be aware of and calling out and ready to respond, because otherwise it will just continue.
Okay. I'm going to chip in now because we have 15 minutes over. I'd like to respect everybody's time. So thank you to all of you for joining the meeting. Thank you especially to our panelists for providing your insight and sometimes sharing your personal stories. So definitely, as our meeting today has shown, this is a topic that we could discuss for hours, and a lot more needs to get done. So hopefully we can all help in our own way to get this going, maybe by educating people around us, by creating awareness, by showing survivors support. So I'm sure all of us will take something away from this meeting. So thank you to each one of you. I'm going to call out the panelists once more because your time and your ideas have been really precious to us. So thank you, Dr. Beena. Thank you to, I'm just going through my list alphabetically, sorry. Thank you to Kat. Thank you to Catherine. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Vaikari. Thank you, Emily and Nimi and Ramya and each and every one of you. Thank you for taking time from your Sunday. I think this is being recorded. Hopefully we will be able to publish this soon. All right?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Have a great Sunday.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.